I don't know about you, but I am a kind of person that is usually very focused on the destination, the goal, the point, the purpose. I think it's important for any project, anything that you're going to do, that you should know what you're doing and why you're going to do it. And of course, the goal is to get her done, get it done. And so that naturally leads to the question is, how long is it going to take? When are we going to when are we going to be there? When are we going to get there when you're a destination person? And so for me, if you travel with me or when I go on trips with my family, most people don't notice these signs, but mile marker signs, I don't know how many of you pay attention to mile markers. Like now, all the exits on the interstate are numbered by the mile marker, so you know how far you are from an exit. And so as I'm driving along, I'm counting them down. I have this far to go till I get to this exit. I got this many more exits until I get to where we're going to get off, or this many more counties to go through across the county lines. And so I know I'm weird, but that's the way I am. And my wife, Molly, she's more of a stop and smell the roses kind of person. She didn't know there were mile markers till she married me. She doesn't pay attention to that kind of stuff. It's more like enjoy the journey, enjoy the getting there, and just and stop and smell the roses kind of deal. And so for me, if you know me, I think there's it's a kind of a double-edged sword there, because being focused on the goal is good, because you can get something accomplished, you get there, you arrive, you get it done. But sometimes that can lead to tunnel vision, sort of miss what's maybe not on my to-do list that's going on around me that might need to be accomplished. That can be the case. And sometimes, especially for me, to be in a hurry. I think I can be in a hurry sometimes to get this particular task accomplished. So it can be kind of a double-edged sword. There's a saying that is good for people like me to remember, and that is that it's not about the journey, it's about the journey, not the destination. Maybe you've heard that saying too. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Probably if I were to modify this, I would say it's about the journey and the destination. The destination is important. It is important that where you're going. And I would say probably another way we say it, that the way that you get to your destination, your journey will lead you to your destination. What road that you are on, the way that you are traveling will lead you to where you are going. When you get to a place and you look around and say, how did I get here? What happened? Well, you got here by the way that you traveled. And sometimes we imagine there's a destination that we want to travel to or we want to be. And so we just think we're just going to magically arrive at that destination. No, the journey that you are on is leading to you to your destination. But as important as the destination is the journey. I mean, it's along the journey. It's in between those destinations that life happens. Life happens on the journey, on the way to another destination, because as soon as you reach that destination, you're thinking of the next destination and the next goal and the next thing that you're reaching for. But what happens is between those destinations where all the events of your life, and after you reach that destination, you look back on your life and you think, wow, where did all those years go? I've gotten older, or now I'm out of school, or now I'm done with work, or I'm retired, or now my kids have grown, or those young people that I used to know have grown up, or now these other people that I knew have passed on. So much has happened. Life happened in between those destinations. And so what happened is that we can become so focused on the destination that we're not present on the journey. We're not enjoying the trip. We're so focused on being to the next goal, or being through with this season, or being done with this, that we don't enjoy it anymore. We don't enjoy this season. We never enjoy any season, because ultimately we're so focused on then that we're not present in all the nows. We're so focused on then, we miss all of the nows. But you know what? You never live your life then. You're only living in the now. Now is the only thing that you're given. I mean, it's the only gift that you're guaranteed. That's why they call it the present. So, have a nice day. That's your lesson for today, okay? Enjoy all your... No, but it is true that for Christians, that sometimes we can be the same way. We think the Christian life is all about destinations. It's all about then. It's all about where you're going. And it is true, destinations are very important. Maybe you've heard the question, you've been asked the question, where are you going to spend eternity? You're going to spend it one way, smoking or non-smoking. It's your choice, that kind of deal. You heard that kind of question. And that is true. That's a very important question. And there's a lot of people who are confused about their destination, or they may be thinking their destination's in one place and it's another. So that's a very important question. But it's equally as important as where are you going to spend eternity is how is eternity influencing where you're going? Where are you going now? What are you doing now in light of eternity? What are you doing now in light of then? Now, this is no new thing, okay? We're very concerned about then, and so were Jesus' disciples. We look for signs associated with then. How much longer till we get to where we're going? And Jesus' disciples were very concerned about then and signs of arriving to that then place as well. Because they were expecting Jesus to bring his political power to bear and to bring glory and to establish them to a place of power at any minute. I mean, they were just waiting for him just to drive the Romans out, to set up his throne. They were just expecting it to happen at any moment. And Jesus didn't talk a lot about that. But then when he did, they jumped on it. They wanted to know more. And one of those occasions happened as Jesus was leaving the temple in Jerusalem on the last week before he was to be crucified on Friday. This is probably like Tuesday of Holy Week. And Jesus is leaving the temple grounds. He's walking away from the holy city of Jerusalem. It's a beautiful setting. I mean, it's an impressive building, incredible structure, the temple in Jerusalem. And Jesus points out all the buildings. He said, "Do you see all these impressive buildings?" Matthew chapter 24, verse 2. "You see all these things? I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." He gives a hint at what's coming, which is destruction. The entire temple is going to be destroyed. Now you can imagine the kind of conversation that this would have stimulated among the disciples. I mean, they were saying, what's going to happen? Is it going to be an earthquake? What's going to happen? The temple's going to come down. Is he talking about the end of the world? Because for the temple to be destroyed, I mean, if that's going to happen, there had to be some kind of army attacking the city. We know there's some kind of battle that's going to happen at the end of time. Jesus must be describing this battle that's going to be the last battle when he's going to set up his kingdom, and this is going to be the end. That must be what he's talking about. And so when they get the chance, they ask him. It says in verse 3, Jesus is sitting on the Mount of Olives, which is right across the way from the Temple Mount. I've been to the Mount of Olives, and standing there, it's just right there where the temple stood. It's a beautiful spot. You can see the eastern side of Jerusalem. And as Jesus was sitting there, the disciples come to him. Here's our chance. They ask him the question. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen?" When? "And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" They ask about signs. How are we going to know it's about to happen? When will it happen? And how will we know it's about to happen? Now, of course, what they're asking about really is about the destruction of the temple, what Jesus had just promised, that not one stone will be left upon another. But we know, looking back 2,000 years, that happened and it wasn't the end of the world. In their mind, it was the end of the world. So in reality, they're asking two questions. When will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And so Jesus proceeds to answer their first question. He gives them hints or clues as to when it will happen. When the destruction of the temple, which will also be the destruction of the entire city of Jerusalem, and a terrible siege, which will lead to the death of what some ancient historians have said is over 1 million people, a trauma that the city had never experienced before. Jesus describes a time of distress that will be unequaled since the beginning of the world. And then he gives them a clue in verse 34. He says, "I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened." In fact, he adds the phrase, "truly I tell you." In the Greek or the Aramaic word, there's amen, which means it is true. It's an amen saying. This generation will not pass away. Now, in biblical times, a generation was considered to be about 40 years. And he's saying that some of you who are alive, you're going to see what I'm predicting come to pass. And in fact, it was about 40 years. Some estimate, say it's exactly 40 years later, in the year 70 AD, that the Romans, under the leadership of Titus, the son of the emperor, they sacked Jerusalem, they destroyed the city, they sieged it first. There were over 1 million that died, some estimate, and they destroyed the temple. It came to pass. Jesus answered their question. When will these things happen? And then he shifts gears to answer the second part. What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And here's what he said. All right, you listening? Verse 36. But about that day or hour, no one knows. Oh, man. No one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. Verse 37. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Now, when Jesus predicted the destruction of Jerusalem, he's like, look for these signs, okay? He gives them a hint about desecrations and abominations, which points to perhaps armies surrounding Jerusalem. When you see this happen, run, get out of the city. He said, you know when a fig tree is about to produce its fruit. In the same way, when you see these things, you know that it's near at the gate. Look for the signs. Be ready. But about this sign, about this event, no one knows. It's going to be like the days of Noah. And what were the days of Noah? By the way, the guy Noah, he built a boat and he saved all the animals, and there was a flood and a rainbow, in case you haven't heard that story. That's what happened with Noah. In that kind of time, that's the way it's going to be at the coming of the Son of Man. Now, the Greek word here for coming is actually the Greek word parousia. You ever heard that? You learned a Greek word today? Okay. That word means arrival. And not every time you see the word coming in the New Testament, that it means arrival. And not all the time is it this Greek word. In fact, in verse 30, Jesus says, you're going to see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. And it's actually a different word. It's describing something different. This is the arrival of Jesus, His return. We would some describe it as the second coming. This is the way it's going to be at that day, at the end of the age. Verse 38. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and being given in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. Okay? They weren't prepared. They were living their lives. Verse 39. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. People will not be ready. They will not be expecting it. Okay? And then Jesus goes on to use an example of a thief who strikes your house, who comes at night. He said, a thief, of course, one of the key advantages of a thief, but they cannot be successful without it, is the element of surprise. Okay? If you knew a thief was going to break into your house, what would you do? You would turn all the floodlights on. You would leave the dog outside. You would be sitting there with your shotgun ready. Okay? The thief depends upon you not being ready for his arrival. Jesus compares his return to the coming of a thief. You will not expect it. In fact, he says so explicitly in verse 44. You must also be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour when you do not expect him. You will not expect it. It will be a surprise, my return. And so what this means is constant vigilance, constant readiness. You must always be ready. The Son of Man will come at an hour that you do not expect him. And then, of course, Jesus tells a parable. But we see that Jesus says the way that we'll be ready for then is by prioritizing now. You'll be ready for that day by prioritizing this day, because that day could be this day. You never know. We will be ready then by prioritizing now. And then Jesus tells a parable. There's actually 3 parables that he tells in this part, beginning in Matthew chapter 24, moving forward to chapter 25. And we're going to talk about one of those parables next week. But he uses a parable that is an interesting parable. He compares it to servants who are given responsibility for a household. In verse 45, who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? Who is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of his household to give them their food at the proper time? Okay, who is that faithful and wise servant? Verse 46. It will be good for that servant whose master find him doing so when he returns. Truly I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. Verse 48. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. Verse 50. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Not a good result for him. Okay? So we see 2 different servants, or 2 different responses. We see one servant who is very concerned about the destination. Okay, do you notice which of the 2 is concerned about then? It was the one who wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. Like, oh, I got plenty of time. My master's not coming back for a long time. He's delayed. I mean, we even wonder if he's even going to come back. And so I'm just going to do what I want to do, you know. He's not attentive to the present moment. Whereas the other is focusing on the now. One is concerned more about then, destinations, I mean, where are we going? The other is focused on the now. Well, we could sum this teaching all up really in what Jesus says in verse 42. He said, therefore keep watch, because you do not know. You do not know on what day your Lord will come. You don't know. So you should always be ready. Take advantage of every now. Because ultimately now is all you've got. All you're promised. So how do we keep watch? Is it by holding the candle, standing at the door, turning the floodlights on, sitting there with our shotgun, being prepared for the thief, you know? How do we always looking? Does it mean pulling up the Bible, open the Bible, pull up the newspaper, comparing the truth, trying to figure out when it's going to be, you know? Teach us on Revelation, Matt, because we want to know all about what's going to happen at the end so we can all be ready and know exactly how it's going to transpire. We don't know, okay? And I've taught on Revelation, it's not in there. It doesn't tell us when. It doesn't. Well, I think we have a hint on how we keep watch by what Jesus says in this parable. I think it's a clue, and it's also a word to all of us, a word to consider. It could be a word of encouragement. It could be a word of warning. It's what he says in verse 45. Okay? Who is the faithful and wise servant? That's who we want to be, right? We want to be the one who's commended, the one who's put in charge of everything when he comes back. Who is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household, the fellow servants, to give them their food at the proper time? To give them their food, okay? To serve his fellow servants. What does this mean? His household. To serve the fellow servants in his household. Well, we have a clue, okay? This term household is actually used in some other Bible passages. For example, in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 19, the Apostle Paul says that you are no longer foreigners, speaking to the Christians there, he says, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and members of His household. You are His household, the church, the community of believers. In Galatians chapter 6, verse 10, Paul says, therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people, especially to those who belong to the family of believers. Actually, the Greek word there is household. The household of believers. Let us do good to all. We are a part of the family of God. Okay, the household of God. That's who makes up a household of family. To serve the other members of our family. And so what Jesus does is He takes this teaching about the end of the world, about the end of time, and the focus on then, and He totally flips it around. He makes it a teaching about now. That instead of looking for signs of then, maybe somebody else is looking for signs. In other words, instead of looking for signs, be one. Instead of looking for signs of the coming kingdom, be a sign of the coming kingdom. You be a reminder to the world that I'm coming back because you're being faithful to do what you're called to do, to serve your brothers and sisters, to serve other people. The priorities for God's servants are to be the other members of the household. And so maybe the sign that God is looking for is serving others. Serving others is the sign that God is looking for, and that's why we're all about serving others here at Mulder Church. Sometimes it involves bringing food to fellow servants, literally. Literal food that you eat, okay, that you put in your mouth. Sometimes it involves the means to get food. Sometimes it's the food of the Word of God. This past Tuesday, we had 3,400 people from our community who came here to vote on our church campus, okay? And they started coming at 7 o'clock, and they were still voting here at 7 o'clock. Many of you were here, you voted. We had 4,000 that voted in a presidential election in 2016. We had 3,400 here this past Tuesday. We had 2,300 in the special election last December. That's an increase of 50% from last year. We had a lot of people here. And I was walking around greeting them, okay, and some of them were mad. I'm just telling you, they were not in a good mood. It was like they were mad, and they were about to express it through voting. They've probably been waiting for a long time to do that. And so I was like, hey, how you doing? They're like, I don't even want to talk to you. I don't like you. I mean, that's kind of the impression I got from some of you. But still, we had food here for them. And maybe it wasn't the healthiest food, but it was delicious, okay? And people came here and they got greeted with a smile. There were people here with umbrellas to help people here in the rain. Democrats, Republicans, we don't care. Serving each other here on the church campus, people, the body of Christ, showing the love of Christ, showing that a human soul is way more important than who you vote for. We serve others in the midst of disasters. We got brothers and sisters who are struggling because of disaster. We had a team we prayed over at our 9:30 service today that was sent to North Carolina. They're leaving on Tuesday. We got teams prepared to go to Florida that are already in training. We're preparing to set dates to do that, to go down to help those affected by Hurricane Michael. We're raising $15,000 to help Lynn Haven United Methodist Church. We got a partnership with Zambia in Africa. We sent a team last year. We're looking to start conferences this year. We got some who are going to be training teachers and pastors there in a conference this summer. Okay, and we got our great ministry that happened in so many ways. We got great ministry happening with the Village Church at Autumnwood. That's been going on for almost 5 years now. And I wanted to share one of those stories with you. One of those whom you serve, whom we serve, and her name is Brianna, and now she is serving. I want to share her story with you.
Hey, my name is Brianna Rosales. I go to Itamco Middle School. I am in the 7th grade. I attend here the Village Church. This place has been a really big impact in my life because I really don't remember much before it. I was in the 2nd grade when I started coming here. We tutor on Tuesdays, and I tutor the younger kids, and I help them with their homework. I used to be the one who used to be tutored, but now I tutor them. I used to have like B, C honor roll. I don't even think that's a thing, but see. Now I have like A, B honor roll. This church has helped me to get in the gifted program. My grades actually improved a lot more. And they've helped out a lot with me, and I've tried helping them myself. I tutor and I translate on Sunday nights for the adults that come here for a service. Mark is actually the best pastor in the world. He's always been so nice to us. I remember when we met him, he offered us to go to kids club during the summers when we started. We would do fun activities, learn about Jesus, and I actually learned a lot about him. By being here, he will always be the one that will always take care of you, protect you, and be your friend when no one else is.
I want you. Yeah, give a hand for that. Give a hand for that. I want you to be ready for the Messiah when he comes back. I want you to be ready. I don't want you to be caught off guard. And so I'm giving you a chance to serve others. There are needs all around us, and there's needs of the village church. We have a need for food on Sunday evenings when they gather for their worship service. We have a need for tutors on Tuesday afternoon that you just saw about. We have a need for our Wednesday night team that leads ministry for the kids on Wednesday nights. Okay, we have needs for the facility to be painted, some other things to be done to the church facility out there at the village church at Aldenwood Trailer Park. There's so many needs, okay? And I know you're busy. I'm busy too. And it's true that we can't help everyone. I mean, you can't serve everyone, but you can serve someone. You can't be everywhere, but you are somewhere. And you can't do everything, but you can do something. And what the disciples discovered about Jesus, okay, is that he's the real deal, okay? Here's a guy who predicted the fall of Jerusalem within a generation, and it happened at exactly that length of time. A guy who predicted his own death and resurrection. And he also said, I'm coming back again, and it's going to catch everybody off guard. And so it'd be wise for you to be prepared. I don't want you to be caught off guard. And so now the focus turns to you. Are you just focused on destinations? That you got baptized, you prayed a prayer, you raised your hand at a revival, that you got fire insurance or whatever? Is that what you're counting on? Okay. Or are you concerned about being about God's business now? About serving His household. Being a faithful servant in His household. All right. Well, let's agree to this, okay? Let's agree to be about our Master's business now. Because when the day that He comes back, and the day that He surprises everyone, it's going to be proved true that He's the real deal. We already know it. then the question is going to be, are you the real deal? And I hope the answer is yes. And if it is, prove it.